Leaders debate. There's now just 2 days left to vote, and this is one of the last opportunities for the leaders to pitch to any undecided voters. I'm very pleased to have an audience tonight here. It feels like a bit of a luxury in this COVID-19 era. And remember, if you're deaf or hard of hearing, you can watch sign language interpreters on Freeview Channel 200. But let's start tonight with the latest and final One News Colmar Brunton poll of the 2020 campaign. 48 hours out, here's how the parties are looking. Labour is sitting on 46, down 1 from last week's poll. National is on 31, also dropping 1. The Greens boost up to 8 and ACT is still on 8 as well. New Zealand First creeps up to 3, but on these numbers won't make it back to Parliament. Now for some of the other parties. The New Conservative Party sits on 2, and Advance New Zealand, the Opportunities Party and the Māori Party all get 1 each. These numbers mean Labour would need the Greens to govern and National and ACT would be warming the opposition benches. I want to put these numbers to you first, Jacinda Ardern. You may be able to govern alone or even with the Greens. Do you promise this time to be transformational? You sat here 3 years ago and said that you would.
And I believe that we have been. You know, change, real change, requires steps that bring people with us. If we want lasting change on issues like our environment, on cleaning up our rivers, on climate change, we need to try and build consensus and make sure that every 3 years the progress we've made doesn't unravel. I've seen that happen before in my time. I don't want it to happen on major issues that require sustained change.
But you really sold people on this idea of transformation, and I think some voters got really excited about that idea. Do you promise you will be this time?
And I stand by my record. Let's take child poverty. 7 out of the 9 indicators there, we have turned around and we are making progress. No one for a moment would believe that we could fix an issue that takes decades to build in 3 years. I am not done yet. I'm asking for people to support us and I want to talk with the progress we've made.
More about child poverty a bit later on, but just on the polls, National has an understanding with ACT and Epsom. You haven't done the same with Greens for Auckland Central. This is MMP. Why not play the game?
Oh, well, ultimately, you know, we've seen no need for that. We see representation in local seats as really important, but equally you've seen those parties actually polling strongly anyway, making over that threshold as well. But our view, of course, has been that local representation matters to us. You've seen in Auckland Central, our candidate has been the top polling candidate.
Judith Collins, on these numbers, you're stagnating in the early 30s. Why haven't you been able to bring those National supporters back?
Well, I'd say to you, Jessica, there's around about, I think it's 14% of people are either undecided or they've refused to answer the pollsters' questions. I would say a good chunk of those people will make their minds up on election day, and quite a few of those, and certainly that's what they've seen in Australia, around 8% do it in the actual polling booth. And I think there's a lot of people who are going to be looking at it and saying, just how bad is the economy likely to get? And with the International Monetary Fund coming out today and saying that by 2025, another 5 years, New Zealand is going to be in a significantly worse position than they even were last year, I think there'll be a lot of people who will be saying, yes, we want to come and vote National. Earlier
in the year, National was sitting firmly in the 40s under Simon Bridges. Would National have been better just to stick with him?
Well, I think it was. It's easy to say those things, except that there were no public polls at that time, as you will recall. After that, and our certainly internal polling had us.
We did have regular Colmar Brunton. Well,
our internal polling had us significantly.
But the public
in the
polls,
mid-20s actually at that stage. It was quite significant, but also it was really clear that the caucus decided to change the leader to Todd Muller. And eventually asked me to do it.
So what is your path to power with these numbers?
Well, obviously it's around the 14% who either won't say or can't say at this stage. Plus also I think it is absolutely important for everybody voting for those minor parties at the moment to understand that the only way to get a national-led government is to party vote national. I think that's really important. People need to understand that their votes will otherwise be wasted, and that is probably not what they expected. I don't think the people voting New Conservatives actually want to have a Labour Greens government. I don't think the New Zealand First people do either.
So is that the strategy here, to try and convince some of those people who are voting for smaller parties to switch?
It's amazing the number of people who say things like, I'm voting for National in my electorate vote, but, you know, do you want me to vote for another party for the party vote, because that will help you, won't it? No, it will not.
But that means you're not getting your message across. Well, I think 2 ticks blue we've heard over and over.
Yeah, and you know what? It's we've had MMP since 1996, and still people get this wonder of whether or not... I'm sure that there are people who will vote Greens for their party vote, but will possibly vote Labour Party for the candidate. I've certainly seen people who have voted for me in the electorate and then voted Greens as well, because they think that they should do, or they think that that will help us. It won't help us. The only way to do it is to party vote national.
What's your response to that? You don't seem to agree with that very much.
Oh no, look, every party goes out and campaigns, particularly the main parties, and asks for 2 ticks. You know, our message though has been very, very clear, and you know, I'm pleased that we're seeing the support in those polls that demonstrate people are looking for stability. They're looking for unity. They're looking for certainty, and particularly in these uncertain times, they're looking for a plan. I think in this campaign it's been so important to demonstrate to people that we are focused on the issues that New Zealand and indeed the world is facing, and not on ourselves, and that's what we've done.
All right, a question for both of you. Why do you think that so many people are heading out to vote early? Judith Collins, I'll come to you first.
Well, I think that there are some people have said that they already know how they're going to vote, so they want to go out and do that. There is certainly traditionally, a lot of national voters will vote on the last day, and that's part of the fact that it used to just be the only day that we could vote was on election day. It certainly is part of that sort of community spirit that people often get from voting on election day. I just think some people are saying, well, I know what I want to do now, so I want to go. I just hope they haven't changed. They don't regret, get buyer's remorse by voting the wrong way before election day.
Why do you think?
You know, frankly, I actually think people have made up their mind, and some people will actually be done with the election. It has, let's acknowledge, it's been a long campaign. It had a false start, and that's probably made it feel even longer. And I think people's minds are on the future. You know, they want to know what's next. They want to know where we're going to take them as we come through this period that the entire world is facing. And I do get the sense that people are locking in that vote. You know, I think the reason you've got some people in your poll not declaring how they're voting is because they've already voted, and they probably want to keep that decision to themselves. But from what I've heard out on the streets, you know, I do think people are picking the certainty and stability of keeping us in government.
All right, well, we'll wrap this part back. One of these women will form the next government, but it's not going to be an easy 3 years. Not only do we need an economic recovery plan, but New Zealand already has some deep-seated problems to fix. So let's start off with poverty. Jacinda Ardern, this week you promised to halve child poverty by 2030. But the Child Poverty Action Group have told us in preparing for this debate that you could actually fix it right now. You could use that $14 billion pot of money left over from the COVID recovery fund, and you could use that to solve that problem right now. Wouldn't that be transformational?
Well, 2 things I think we need to, 2 points to make here. That COVID recovery fund, we do need to make sure that we have available, should we need it for resurgence, should we need it to prevent people moving into unemployment, all the things that worsen the issues around child poverty. The second thing is that we have made a significant investment over these last 3 years in making sure that we're providing things like food in schools, lifting the benefit rates for those who are on the lowest incomes, lifting minimum wage, all the things that make a difference. And we are on track with the targets that we have set ourselves, but there is more we need to do to keep lifting children up.
Where's the urgency? That's got to be tempting, having that money sitting there.
And there is urgency. The first 100 days, one of the first things we did was issue a budget outside of cycle so that we could support those on the lowest incomes. $5.5 billion. We cancelled the last National Government's tax cuts in order to support those on the lowest incomes instead. Now, we did that with urgency because it was one of the most pressing issues, and we have continued every step. But I will not fix child poverty in 3 years. It's a another reason I'm asking for a mandate.
It's got worse. So if you look at... No, it is correct. And if you look at material hardship...
If you let her talk, I'll come back to you.
Material hardship, kids living in material hardship, which means that they can't get to a doctor in time, things like that, are 4,100 more than they were when Ms Ardern took office. She promised to end child poverty, and the stats that she's talking about actually depend on other people's income coming down because it's a medium income. It's got nothing to do with the real hardship that kids are living in, and we've got 150,000 children living in poverty. So if you talk to the food banks, they will tell you things have actually got worse, they haven't got better. So when we're talking about transformational change, it's actually just got worse.
Well, that is completely incorrect.
It is.
There are 9 measures for child poverty. 7 of them were getting worse under the last government. Those 7 we have turned around. Now, I'm not denying there's more to do. That's why food in schools, that's why making doctors' visits cheaper was important.
Judith Collins, what's your target then? The Prime Minister is saying halving child poverty by 2030. What do you say?
We would love to do that too, actually. And one of the ways of doing that is getting people into work, getting adults into work. And actually, at the same time, we were the first government to raise real welfare benefits for people. We were the first ones to do that. And what Ms Ardern's forgetting is that, of course, it's no good just saying, oh, well, medium incomes and children, one child, one household is better off than another child, another household, which is those 7 that she's talking about. What really matters is whether or not a child is getting fed, whether or not a child is going to the doctor when they need to, whether or not a child has shoes on their feet. That's what matters, and that's material hardship. And there are now 4,100 more children in material hardship.
All right, so you're committing to the same target as Jacinda Ardern?
We would love to see. We would actually...
No, not love to see. Do you commit to that target?
Yeah, I tell you what, one of the things with the targets, as Ms Ardern will tell you, is when you use medium income, child versus median income, you can't actually ever get there. Oh, we'd obviously like to get that. And Bill English, before me, has also committed to that. We're happy to do that.
So you're committing to that today?
Well, if we can possibly do it, yes, we would. We would love to get there.
Jessica, what I'd say is that requires a plan. You know, actually, what I've heard from the National Party during this election campaign is they don't want to see those on the lowest incomes see those incomes increase. They didn't support the changes that we made to benefits, and they actually are proposing to make cuts to the Best Start payment, which is all about those children on the lowest incomes. So it's all well and good to say these things, but I see nothing that will materially change child poverty.
Final word here.
We've said that we will means test it, but at the same time, with our 1,000 days, first 1,000 days for a child's life, that is where the big emphasis needs to be. So yes, we would put the more money into the first 1,000 days for a child's life so that mums and their kids can get the best start that they can. And as for Best Start, it needs to be means tested. All
right, I want to move on to a topic that a lot of people watching at home will feel passionately about, and that's housing. I asked this question in the multi-party debate as well. Will either of you bring in any changes that would bring down the price of housing? Judith Collins.
Well, I won't say that we'll bring down the price of housing. What I will say is that we'll add supply, which is where we actually can get houses built cheaper. I'm not saying people who have got a house that they've paid a lot of money for, that we're going to suddenly have them lose everything that they've saved for.
But lose a bit.
Well, it's obvious that if you increase supply, you'll get some drop in terms of pricing if you increase enough supply. But I'm certainly not asking for people to go and lose their life savings, that's for certain. But if we reform the RMA and we do some mass consentings like we did after Christchurch for the rebuild, we can get that increase.
Jessica, it's fair to say for many people their home will be their asset, you know, and that is incredibly important for their financial security. But what we've had a problem with in New Zealand is that we haven't been building at the same time houses in the affordable range for those first home buyers. Now, when we came in, our view was that we had an issue with too much demand, so we tried to take the heat out of the market by stopping foreign buyers, by closing tax loopholes and by building affordable housing. Now today we can see that CoreLogic is telling us that now first home buyers are making up 25% of the market. That's the highest on record. So I stand by what we've done. We need to keep building, though. We need to support private development so that we keep getting those affordable homes.
What do both of you, though, say to those people watching at home who are thinking, I'm never going to be able to...
The best way is around supply. The best way is around supply. Whether it is, as we did in Christchurch, where we did mass consentings, it's something even Phil Twyford thinks is a great idea. Trouble with Phil, he can never actually get anything done. That's the problem. But it is important that we focus on how we increase supply.
Okay,
that is the secret.
For me, I ask first home buyers, you know, a lot of them are paying the kinds of rent that would pay a mortgage right now. The deposit is a hurdle. Now, I don't want first home buyers accessing the market to be determined by whether or not their parents can loan them enough money. So progressive home ownership, our welcome home loan scheme where we've dropped down how much people need, that will help get people into their housing.
Okay, I want to move on to another topic. The Māori Party have put forward that they want to have Māori solutions to Māori problems, and when Māori are poorly overrepresented in housing and education and the justice sector, do we need to try a different system, a different way of doing this? Jacinda Ardern first.
Yes, because there are areas clearly where we haven't made progress. You know, good key example for me would be in the area of state care for children. No one wants to see children removed from their homes, but we also want children to be safe. You know, very recently we saw, we've just launched a program where whānau ora are now working with hundreds of families to prevent children being uplifted. These are the kinds of initiatives that I hope will start turning around those devastating statistics.
Do you think we should try something new?
Well, we already have with things like rangatahi courts that we brought in for young offenders who are Māori. It's very important too that we address the issues around, in some cases, let's say intergenerational extreme poverty and also intergenerational welfare dependency, which is absolutely crucial that we address that. So if I look at treaty settlements, one of the best ways that we can help Māori to actually achieve potential and to have a real feel as though and know that they really do have real ownership. 56 treaty settlements under national. That is an enormous number, more than anybody else, any other government's ever done.
Are you comfortable, though, with this idea of a separate system?
Well, I'm not comfortable with it in terms of a different justice system. What I am comfortable with is what I set up when I was Justice Minister, which is things like alcohol and drug courts, whatever works. So when it's things like rangatahi courts, if it is taking young offenders who happen to be Māori and getting them to understand that there is a better way, I think you do what you have to do to get things through, don't you?
Jacinda Ardern, that same separate system question to you, does that sit comfortably with you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've seen some of those proposals, and instead what I think we should be thinking about is, yes, actually changing the way that we do things. The rangatahi courts are a good example. I've sat in on them. They are exceptional in what they do. But actually, what are we doing to make sure that there's greater partnership and a seat at the table? You know, when the time we've been in office, we've made sure, for instance, on our district health boards that we have greater Māori representation because we have done a poor job for health outcomes there. And so we should be trying to do things differently. We should be taking a partnership approach.
All right, well, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much. Coming up, we put out a call for questions. Welcome back. It's not just a COVID election. When we asked undecided voters to send us their questions, we got a huge range of topics. So let's start with an issue that's proving stressful for our fruit and vegetable growers. I want to ask both of you, would you be prepared to make an exception for fruit pickers to come from the Pacific to help us out here? We are, after all, making exceptions for sports teams. Jacinda Ardern.
Yes, we would be prepared to look at that. In fact, we are. But of course, what we're doing right now, but what we're doing at the same time is looking at those regions that have shortages and matching our job seekers from within New Zealand into those roles too. We have to prioritise getting those who are seeking work into work, but at the same time, no one wants to see fruit rot on the ground, so we have to work with industry, and we are.
But what we're hearing from growers is that New Zealanders aren't applying for these jobs. They're not putting up their hands.
And so we need to look at what the barriers are. I remember sitting down with one of our sectors maybe a year ago who had an issue recruiting pickers. They found that once they changed the shifts that they had, they were able to find those who had caregiving duties because they offered school hours for work. We do need to make sure we're being creative, look at the barriers to work and do everything we can to train and support people into those roles.
Because Judith Collins, when I was with you in Blenheim last week, you were hearing that very concern from growers. Would you make this an urgent priority?
Yes, we would, and we can't wait around. So with the horticultural industry, for instance, they can't wait around because their fruit needs to be picked when it needs to be picked. The same with the vineyards. And also it's really important to remember that these are big industries for us, and if they lose their fruit on the ground or they rot, basically they also then have to be pruned. So it's not just 1 year that they lose, it's more. The other thing with the RSE workers is they come in from the Pacific, and we know that the Pacific has actually lost all its tourism, pretty much like international tourism like we have. It is actually part of what we should do as responsible members of our nations in the Pacific, to actually make sure that we have people who are trained,
I want to move on to the next
willing
question.
to work, and actually we can house them.
A viewer asked, will your faith play a role in governance?
Well, it already does, in terms that I try to be the best that I possibly can. And obviously sometimes I feel, oh gosh, I wish I'd done that one better or whatever. But that's
Do you mean some of the comments, some of the personal comments?
Oh, no, look, you're always going to have a sense of humour with me. I am exactly who I was. I've always been someone who has been what I'd call a liberal Anglican. I have always been part of that. And of course, do you know what? It's nothing wrong with having a sense of humour.
All right, the same question to you, Jacinda Ardern. What will faith play a role in your governance, or does it play a role?
I don't subscribe to any particular religion, but I was raised in one, and I hope what people can see is that I respect people no matter their belief, no matter their upbringing, because I had a similar start in my life, and so that has shaped the way I treat people of faith. I respect that. But one of the reasons that I am agnostic now is because, for me, I wanted to make sure that my religious beliefs didn't get in the way of anyone else practicing what they choose to believe themselves.
All right, another question. Will either of you fully fund St John's Ambulance Service? Jacinda Ardern.
No question. We have to find a way through on what is a historic anomaly.
So will you fully fund it?
We will never lose our St John's services. I can guarantee you that. You will never see a loss of service.
Will you fully fund it?
It is a little more complicated than that, Jessica, because there's some things that they benefit from charitable status, but I will never allow St John's services to be stopped. So
Judith,
I give you that guarantee.
Judith Collins.
Well, we already have, of course, funding through ACC, and having been their minister, I know they get significant funding from that. But as you know, they are a charitable institution. I don't think they want to become a government department. I think it's absolutely crucial that they retain such a connection to the community that they have now, and I would never also allow them to stop. The thought of replacing St John Ambulance with a government agency just should worry everybody, so obviously we'll always make sure that they're properly funded.
One of the questions that we got through multiple times when we asked for viewer feedback was people working here on a working visa, they can't bring over their partners because of the restrictions we have. Would either of you consider, with urgency, allowing them to bring their partners across? Judith Collins
first. Certainly something, it would have to be on a case-by-case basis, and what we've seen as an electorate MP, I've certainly seen the last sort of 18 months, is really hard to get any partners over or anything else for people. But I think we do need to always look at it on a case-by-case. Otherwise, it's just basically open slather, and I don't think that's right for New Zealand either.
I still think it's important for us to think for a moment how lucky we are to even be having this kind of debate right now. The fact that we are talking about who it is that will be coming in and working within New Zealand safely and openly is testament to the fact that our COVID strategy has worked. That has meant making trade-offs at the border. Our restrictions are part of the reason that we are safe and that we are sitting in this room together tonight. So I stand by that. We have progressively moved to bring in additional people outside of our residents and citizens, as we've been been able, and I imagine we will continue to do that.
This final question is from a student at West Rolleston School in Canterbury, and we got multiple very strong questions in from that particular school, but this student question is from Lucas, and he says, what's something you have to give to the country that no one else does? Jacinda Ardern.
Well, that no one else does.
He didn't emphasise that. That was my interpretation.
Oh, no.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Lucas. Sorry, Lucas.
Do you know, I think actually probably in part what I bring is an acute awareness that, of course, we are in this job as a privilege, you know, and not by right. And so that means that I know there are other people who could do this job. So I never take for granted that I'm here. I give my everything. No matter what is thrown my way, no matter what crisis is thrown my way, you will always be assured I will give my everything to this job, even if that means a huge sacrifice.
Judith Collins.
Well, just being in the job is an utter privilege. I've been in the role of a minister, as an MP over the years, but I've also bring with me not only experience as 20 years as a lawyer, but also a lot of that time, most of that time in small business. So I bring real business experience and also public company directorship experience as well. So that at a time of grave economic situation that we are moving into now, according to all of the international commentators, that is something that I bring, but also the ability to make decisions.
There's a long list for Lucas. It's very kind. I hope that answers this question.
Lucas,
very quickly.
Lucas probably as well, though, and I imagine actually from the conversations I've had with, you know, our next generation, they want us to look beyond the here and now. And I think in the middle of a circumstance like the one we're in, yes, we have to manage the COVID crisis as it stands, but we have to look to Lucas's future too. And we have to think about all of those challenges, environmental sustainability, training and so on. And that's also
good
what
job,
I can
Lucas.
do.
You sparked a lot of debate there. I enjoyed that. But we're going to have to leave it there. One of these leaders will form the next government, but under MMP, they'll need some help. Next, I'll ask the leaders about negotiations in a strong position. So let's talk about that now. Jacinda Ardern, will you implement the Greens wealth tax?
No.
They say they're bringing it to the negotiating table.
And I've made my view absolutely clear. New Zealanders deserve certainty on something as important as tax policy.
What about
any suggestion that is counter to what I've clearly stated time and time again is mischievous and frankly desperate.
Judith Collins, you've heard her talking there. Do you believe her?
Well, no, I believe that she will, in fact, implement, if she gets a chance, one of the Greens tax requests. So they've got, for instance, a top tax rate going up to 42%.
But the wealth tax, though?
Well, I absolutely believe that they're going to do it. Why? Because James Shaw, Chloe Swarbrick, even the Labour Party Minister Penny Henry has said so, that they'll be talking about capital gains tax next table.
I'm going to call you out on this. This has been happening for 2 weeks now.
Well,
it is a desperate political strategy to try and get votes, and it is wrong. We said that we would campaign on fact, that we would play it straight. This is a blatant campaign of misinformation that I'm putting an end to. I've made my view absolutely clear and my intention absolutely clear. To imply otherwise
is just wrong. You can't afford to say that when you know that the Greens in their welfare policy that they want to put in will add another $12 billion a year to the welfare budget. How can you possibly afford to give them what they want?
But I want to put a question
freeze
in here.
the minimum wage for 3 years. And ACT want a flat tax rate. Will National implement that?
No,
we campaign on our issues, and I've made clear what I will not implement, and what we hear is
mischief. Will you put up the top tax rate?
That is Labour's policy. We have a policy.
Put it up? No,
to
42%.
For the top 2%.
So 42% for anyone over 100,000?
Judith,
so let me put this question to you then, Judith Collins. If you rule something out, would you expect us to take you at your word, and why aren't you taking Jacinda Ardern at hers?
You might ask that, and I'll tell you this, because time and time again during the last election debates, Miss Ardern promised, and Labor promised, that they were going to do certain things. And actually it gets to the stage where you've had so many promises made and almost no delivery, whether it was Kiwi Build, whether it's child poverty, whether it was, what was it?
Politics, of course, is a place where you'll have a lot of back and forth. But I would never stand here and blatantly call someone a liar. And that is unfortunately what Judith Collins is doing now. I would not do that.
I'm sorry,
I have given my word
we start to say this.
And that is what I'm sticking to.
How many broken promises? It doesn't matter what you've promised, essentially, whether it's light rail to the airport, whether it's light rail up to West Auckland, whether it's child poverty reduction.
Are you just trying to scare voters, though, Judith Collins?
Delivered. No, absolutely not. It is important to understand that the Greens have extremely expensive promises that they're making to their voters, including a $12 billion increase in the welfare budget.
All right, well, let's flip this around. I want to flip this question around because ACT is wanting to slash spending, it's wanting to bring in a very austere budget. So would you take that on? They're going to be coming in with 10 MPs on our numbers.
Well, we've said to them very clearly there's lots of things that we can talk to them about and agree on, such as Resource Management Act and building reform, such as cutting red tape, such as, for instance, the extra $700 million that's currently being spent every single year now in the bureaucracy of Wellington under the Labor-led government. That won't be happening.
And Judith, you expect voters to take you at your word.
Well,
and
absolutely,
this is why
because everyone knows what I say.
Labor has always campaigned against Nationals policy and on Nationals proposals. We have never made an assumption that by default everything ACT proposes will happen. We ask that they don't do the same to us. I have been absolutely clear on this issue multiple times,
but you also said
and I will continue to
light
be.
Rail and everything else you promised,
this is
and
a desperate tactic, and frankly,
all right.
sad.
I want to put a question to both of you. If Winston Peters is in the mix after the election, would you work with him again, Jacinda Ardern?
Yeah, I've said, look, I've shown that I could work both with New Zealand First and both with the Greens.
Does that idea please you?
Oh, I will make whatever New Zealand voters deliver work. What I'm very clear on, though, is that we will get things done faster, with a strong mandate, and that's what I'm asking for Labor.
For you, Judith Collins, would you work with Winston Peters?
Well, our caucus has made it very clear that they're not willing to sell out so much to Winston Peters.
But let's be realistic here. If he's the only option, you'd work with him, right?
No, I think it's really clear to also understand at the last election, the negotiations, it was very clear that National was not going to give in to Mr Peters as much as the Labor Party.
And you've sat on the opposition benches for 3 years?
Well, do you know what? There's a lot worse than being on the opposition benches. You know what it is? It's doing the wrong thing for New Zealand. The right thing to do is to stand on principle.
All right, I want to ask about climate change. The Greens are saying they want to go further and faster with climate change, and some people feel very nervous about that. What do you say to those people?
Well, I'd say that actually this is our chance to turn what has been, of course, framed as a crisis into an opportunity for New Zealand. And that's what we've built the foundations for over the past 3 years. We do need to keep going, though. You know, we trade alongside our exporters on our brand. It's an inevitability, of course, that we do need to make changes to move our energy use and our electricity generation to clean tech. That's what we have a plan for, but we benefit as a country when we do that. So let's look at it as an opportunity, because it is.
Well, another topic that the Greens aren't very keen on is GE technology. But farmers have come out and said, look, we should be taking advantage of this. It could really help us when it comes to climate change. Things like growing trees faster or changing feed so that cows don't have so much methane and gas. Is GE technology something you would consider, Judith Collins?
Well, we've made it very clear that we should at least have the conversations with the country about using science, because actually one of the reasons we are such a force when it comes to agriculture and horticulture is over the years we have used science to actually produce crops better, bigger and more cheaply. But also it is important, if we're very concerned about things like methane, that we would, for instance, have the ryegrasses being looked at, tested here rather than having to go to the States.
Very quickly, doesn't she have a point there?
Oh, and look, I wouldn't disagree with the idea that we should have that discussion as a nation. My view is that there is a way where we can make sure that we protect some of the the brand that New Zealanders trade on, and particularly for some of our horticultural sector, that's very important to them, whilst not losing the opportunities that exist both for methane reduction but also pest management. So there is a way through on this.
I want to see if I can get quite a quick answer from both of you. I'll see if I can squeeze it in. Thank you. I wish myself luck too. When the borders do open, the Māori Party is saying don't let anyone come and immigrate until we sort out the housing problem. New Zealand First is saying 10 to 15,000. What's your number, Judith Collins?
Well, what we could cope with, actually. When we were in office, we thought it was about 50,000, but you can't do it without getting housing in place. We've also said too that we would let people come in who are going to be building, getting housing in here for other people to use.
Jacinda Ardern.
Now, I'm not going to give you a number, but what I am going to say is that we can't use immigration as a way to stimulate our economy. We need to bring in skilled people. We need to keep fulfilling our refugee obligations, but we also need to house everyone.
All right, thank you very much. So final questions are after the break, and the final word from both of the leaders. Stay with us. At the end of the debate, we'll hear the final pitch from the leaders shortly. But first, I want to talk to both of you about leadership. Firstly, Jacinda Ardern, if you become Prime Minister next week, will you stay on for a full term?
Yes.
If you don't win, would you stay on as Leader of the Opposition?
No.
Judith Collins, if you don't become Prime Minister next week, why should National keep you in the job?
Because I'm doing a very good job. Nobody can say that I'm not putting everything into it. And I think that we need very strong leadership, and we need someone who can make decisions. And I'm that person with the experience to do it.
Do you feel unfairly like the knives are out for you a bit already? We've seen leaking. Is that a bit unfair?
No, I just think that that's the life of opposition. I think it's also very important that I'm focused on the people of New Zealand. I don't try and get distracted or anything else. I've been around long enough just to keep my eye on the ball, which is actually the people of New Zealand.
Do you think you've got backing?
Yes, absolutely. I know I have backing.
We are in a unique position here tonight. We have two female leaders of our political party. What are you both doing to make sure that there are more women in leadership positions? And Judith Collins, do you even see that as an obligation that you should fulfil?
Do you know, I do, because I think it's really important to have women coming through. Do you know what I really like? Would be if one day there are two leaders of major parties and nobody thinks, who just happen to be women, and nobody thinks that's of any importance, because they'll think, well, of course, why wouldn't you? I just think that it's really important to bring other people through as well. And I will always promote on merit, and I think you've seen that in the reshuffle that I did when I took over.
Yes, I do think we have obligations there. I think our job is to make sure Parliament is a representative place. So making sure that our parties, reflect New Zealand, and our Parliament reflects New Zealand. That means making sure that you have women, Māori, Pacifica, that we have people with experience of disability. That's all important if we are to make sure that we're making decisions that reflect New Zealand's needs and interests.
Like we've mentioned in this debate, it has been quite a long campaign. What are you both not going to miss about this period? Jacinda Ardern.
Oh, I do enjoy campaigning. I do, genuinely, because, in the rigour of Parliament, we don't necessarily get as much time as we do in a campaign out talking to people. And that's been helpful for us to make sure that we are, in our COVID recovery, really reflecting people's needs. But actually, politics, what we give to this job, that's what it's like all of the time. You need that stamina, because none of us are here for a long, long time. So we have to give our all for the time we are here.
Judith Collins, I was just thinking of Winston Peters there. Some people are here for a long, long time. That's why I smile.
There are some exceptions.
But you do have to give up an awful lot. I tell you what, I won't miss with not having to campaign is not being home to have dinner every now and again with my husband and son. I think that's something that I have been missing. But I really love my work so much. I love doing public meetings. I love doing things like that. I really enjoy it. I love meeting New Zealanders and listening to them.
One thing that I was quite curious...
we especially love the debates.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, especially, don't we?
I mean, I was waiting for that. Come on, how long did it...
I hadn't even thought, because I have been enjoying them. And I just think...
how long did it take both of you? Seriously.
Yeah.
One thing I'm really curious to ask you about, you don't get the chance to sit next to each other that often. What's one thing you'd both like to say to each other? done. That's good.
Actually, I have something. It's been a long time since this happened, but I've never had a chance to thank Judith for the speech that she gave after March 15. In the House, she gave an incredibly sincere, authentic speech about the need for us to move on gun law reform. I found it particularly powerful, and I do want to thank Judith for that.
Is there something you would like to say to Jacinda Ardern?
Do you know, I just think that anyone who takes on the job of Prime Minister has to put their heart and soul into it, and Jacinda has been doing that, and I think, you know, that's a really good thing. I don't think anyone should ever take the job lightly. And, you know, I think we can say that that's a great thing.
I want to ask you as well, we look beyond this bubble that we're all in at the moment. What's a goal you have beyond politics? I'll ask you first, Judith Collins, and then for you.
What, beyond, like for ourselves personally?
Yes.
Gosh.
Or even career-wise. I mean, looking beyond
Jessica,
Saturday, which is a challenge.
Certainly be writing another book, Jessica. I mean, goodness, already got a bestseller and need another one. But it'll have to wait a little while because I'm just so busy.
Jacinda Ardern,
this will be a good chapter. This will be a good chapter.
What's your goal beyond politics?
I want politics to change, and whether or not I'm in it trying to change it or whether or not I'm outside of it, I still want to play a role in that. You know, one of the things that I've loved the most about this election is the number of conversations I've had with children about their interest in politics, but I don't take for granted that it's a given that will stick. I want our young people to look at this place and say you can do positive things, that it doesn't have to be about mudslinging, and I want our nation not to be completely polarised. Now, actually, relative to other countries, we do a pretty good job on that. But that's what I want to keep contributing to that.
Compliments and things like that. I mean, flicking of insults and things like that. We've seen a little bit of that tonight. We've definitely seen some of that this week. That's politics.
Oh, look, you've got to have robust debate. No one's denying that, and that's all a part of it. But I also want it to be a place where people can see themselves, and that means diversity in the way people do the job.
Politics has to be entertaining as well. I think that's really important. Otherwise, people just turn off and they can't be bothered. So it's got to be entertaining, but it's actually also has to have substance, and so when we're talking about policies, we do need to have to do that as well. So, you know, I think politics is the most interesting career that I have had, and I've had careers in law and in business, and I just find it a most thrilling and exciting thing. So every day I wake up, Jessica, I really do have a smile on my face.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear.
Permanently.
Now
and it's going all day.
Now you get a chance to directly go down the barrel of the camera and talk to those viewers at home. I'm going to give you a minute each to make your pitch to those voters. Jacinda Ardern, your minute starts now.
After several debates and a very long campaign, some of you may still be undecided. Some of you may have never voted for Labour before. And my message is for you. Now, every vote for Labour is delivering strong and stable government. And that's what we need right now. You know, that means a focus on economic recovery. It means getting more done faster. And we've achieved a lot together, but now is the time to look at the opportunity that lies in front of New Zealand too. Investing in our people, supporting our small businesses, backing our exporters and moving towards becoming clean, green and carbon neutral. But to achieve all of that, we need that stability, we need certainty, and we need a plan to take us forward. That's exactly what's required in uncertain times. And that's why I'm asking that we stick together, that we keep moving, and that you party vote Labour.
Judith Collins, your minute starts now.
Thank you. Thank you for watching tonight. So it is really important that if you want a national-led government, that you party vote national. It is crucial because we are about and are moving right now into very difficult economic times. We need a party that understands business. We need a party where the leader can make very decisive decisions regarding what happens to our economy. We need a party that understands business and getting people into work. So our plan is all focused on the economy, growing the economy so that we can actually have jobs for our children and grandchildren and paying down debt, not the 15 years of deficits that we have from the Labour Party. It is really important that our children want to have a future here and that they're not saddled with debt that is unnecessary. So party vote national for a big technology sector, an economy that's growing, and infrastructure that works for you.
All right, well, there you have it. Thank you very much to the leaders and thank you very much to our audience. Get out and vote if you haven't done that already. You can join the One News team for our election night special on Saturday from 7 p.m. Those results are going to roll in quickly and we'll be right across it. Thanks to the team in the studio and in the control room. Good night.